What's up, everybody? I know there's been a lot of confusion over the last couple shows that I've done since I've been talking about the magnetic pole shift. And I wanted to dive into it a little bit to explain in greater detail what the heck it is that I'm talking about and how it relates to the flat Earth map. So, for those of you that have a keen interest in this, or for those of you that actually want to wake up instead of continue sleeping with the heliocentric model, the lie that they've been propagating for the last few hundred years, now's the time to pay a little bit of attention. So, over here on the left-hand side of the screen, you clearly see an image of the moon. Okay? There's no doubting that this is the moon. You could look up in the sky and see it, same exact image every single night. Interesting to note that the moon's image never changes, ever. We've seen this image our entire lives. We will continue to see this image. What you have on the right is basically a photoshopped image of what the moon would look like if it were filled in with the dark spots, like these craters that they say they are. If the dark spots were land masses, so we filled that in with green, and if the lighter parts, the unshaded parts, were water masses, which over here you could see is shaded in blue. Okay? Now, you could see on the right-hand side that these circles they're concentric circles, and they go all the way into the very center. Okay? What you may not realize, though, is what you're truly looking at, if we take a closer look, is the exact formation of where our land masses are on Earth. United States being right over here, you could see it's upside down. We would have to rotate it to get the proper view of it, but we're not going to do that because we want it to match the moon. We want to make sure that the land masses, the moon image that we're looking at, reflect perfectly where the land masses are on the moon. Down here, you could see South America. Here's Brazil, Argentina. We're going to talk about Lemuria in a minute. Here's New Zealand right down here. Australia, Indian Ocean, India, Sahara Desert. The UK is right in here. You can see Poland, Germany, France. Every landmass is labeled. There's Canada up in here, the North Pole right in this area, North Pacific Ocean. Interestingly enough, each one of these lines, as you can see, these red lines that are going in concentric circles, as I said before, the innermost circle right here, this red circle that's going around, well, this is the this is the Arctic Circle, this innermost circle. And then you venture out a little bit, you can see Tropic of Cancer, the equator, Tropic of Capricorn, and then when you get out to this furthest red line, way out here, this is the Antarctic Circle. So right now, as we know, this circle, interestingly enough, if you look at this map again, you will see absolutely no landmass that represents Antarctica. That's because Antarctica is not a continent at all. It is simply a circle. It is an ice wall. This furthest out red circle that my cursor is going on right now is Antarctica. This is a giant ice wall. Okay, and you're going to see why it's an ice wall in just a second. So the outermost area right here is the ice wall. And then as you go in, you have the Tropic of Capricorn, the equator, Tropic of Cancer, and then, of course, the Arctic Circle. The sun and the moon are bound to these circles. This is the rotational path that the sun and the moon take. But that's not necessarily the purpose of this video. We're going to look at some other stuff here in a second. If we look at the moon on the left and the image that's generated on the right, we can see these circles that I just highlighted. Out here being the Antarctic Circle, Tropic of Capricorn, equator, Tropic of Cancer, and then again, finally, the Arctic Circle. Now, what's interesting to note, now that we looked at this landmass, is if that you take this image, which is a flat Earth map, you can see I have it, the capacity of it is shaded a little bit, and we overlay it directly on top of these circles, keeping the ice wall. You can see where the ice wall is represented here, going around. Now it's a little bit off, obviously, because I didn't really generate it properly. But as you can see, now there is some curvilinear distortion in this particular image that I got. I can't rotate it, but you can see right here. Here's South America. South America is right over here. So if this were to rotate here, everything would rotate to the left a little bit, and these land masses would match perfectly. You can see Australia right down here. These land masses would match perfectly if I were able to rotate this image just a little bit more, which I am not, unfortunately. But this flat Earth map that you see right here would overlay perfectly onto these concentric circles. Now, there's a little bit of curvilinear distortion that I mentioned before because this is a flat image. And you can see how the edges are curved up a little bit. This image doesn't necessarily represent exactly how our flat Earth is because it is suffering from curvilinear distortion. If you don't know what curvilinear distortion is, look that up and you'll see that the next map I'm about to put on the screen is far more accurate in that this flat Earth map would perfectly overlay these land masses. But for the most part, you could see if we just go one or two clicks to the right and put South America over here where it's supposed to be, put the United States and North America, which is right here, put that over here where it's supposed to be, Australia would line up. Now, the glaring thing that you're probably going to ask is, well, Phil, there's a couple land masses on here that aren't on the moon map. What's that all about? Well, let's take a look at those. First of all, you can see if we put these side by side, there is a giant land mass right here that does not exist right over here. You can see these little, this little land mass right here, which is New Zealand. New Zealand is right here, but then we look up here, there is no land mass here. So we have a giant missing land mass here, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Again, if you go back over here, there is another land mass right here. And you could very clearly see that that land mass is not in this area where it should be on the flat Earth map. Well, you say, Phil, well, that just proves that the moon map is not accurate. Well, let's take a closer look at those areas, shall we? The first land mass is right up here, and that is the sunken continent of Atlantis. It is obviously no longer there. If we look again at the flat Earth map, which is right here, it would be right up in this area, and it is clearly not there. Again, if we overlay it, you can see that we are missing a giant land mass right here. Now, if we go down back over here where New Zealand is, bring up our other map. Here's New Zealand. And again, on the flat Earth map, you can see New Zealand here and Australia over here. If we look up that landmass again, that is a landmass by the name of Lemuria. If you don't know what Lemuria is, look it up. It is another continent that sunk to the ocean floor. There are many books written on Lemuria. There are many maps that depict Lemuria, including Mercator's map. So if you go back and you actually look this stuff up, you will see that Lemuria, as well as Atlantis, have been talked about in our history, of course as mythical lands. That's what they always want to tell you, right? But in reality, the moon map, if we look at it, depicts both of these lands, okay? Here you see Australia, here you see Lemuria, and right over here you see Atlantis, okay? This moon is a reflection of our current maps. Here is South America, here is North America, and then you start getting into Europe right over here. Now the question on everyone's mind is, well, what the hell is all this then? Because if this is land, well, this must be land too, right, Phil? Yes, you are right. And that is what we refer to as the lands beyond. And we're going to talk about those lands in just a second. Now, in addition to these couple little colorful maps that we put together here with the moon and the concentric circles and the tropics, the tropical lines, and then you overlay the flat Earth and then everything matches up nice and fine, I also put together a little video which I want to show you guys. Right now, this, whoops, go back. Where are you going? Just hold on there a second. Okay. This map right now represents the same concentric circles that we just saw previously, except it's a little bit more colorful, and what we did on this map was we took out the curvilinear distortion. We made it more to how it would look in our actual, on our actual planet, on our actual Earth. Okay, so as you can see right over here, you have New Zealand. Right down here, you have Australia. This large landmass right here is Lemuria, the one that no longer exists. Right up here, you have South America, North America. The UK is right in this area. Russia, China, every landmass that you have is here. The reason for this video, the reason why I'm making this video today, is to show you what the sun and moon do in terms of magnetic rotation around our Earth. Okay? So first of all, this is Earth. Earth is this big, giant mass. The lands we know about and the lands that we occupy are in the highlighted section. You can see this section up here is shaded out. Why? Because it doesn't have a sun. Okay, and we're going to talk about that in a second too. Right in the middle, in this shaded in red area right here, this is what we call true north. This is what's referred to the Bible. Actually, let me pull that photo up real quick. That's not the one. There it is. This is what we refer, so these are our current lands right here. You can see them again, okay? You have New Zealand down here, Australia, Lemuria, South America, North America, UK is right in this area, North Pole is right in this area, okay? Here's what it says in Enoch, verses 1 through 4. And the fourth quarter, named the north, is divided into 3 parts. The first of them is for the dwelling of men. The second contains seas of water. Now, first of all, let's take what Enoch is saying, literally. The first is divided into 3 quarters. Here's your first quarter up here. This is for the dwelling of men. This is where men live, okay? Men live here because this is where the lands are. The green areas are obviously the lands. The first of them is for the dwelling of men. The second contains seas of water. Well, if you look at this, there's a pretty big sea of water right here. Right? There's not much here other than water. And the abysses and the forests and the rivers and darkness and clouds. The third part is the garden of righteousness. Right here. The garden of righteousness. Does that ring a bell to anybody? What else would be known as the garden of righteousness? Well, perhaps the Garden of Eden. Maybe. We're going to go over these east, south, and west quarters in a moment too, but let's get back to our little video. So as you can see, this area right here is what Enoch was referring to as the Garden of Righteousness. Okay? The entire area right now is within our Antarctic Circle. Keep in mind, the Antarctic Circle is this outermost line, and since the sun and the moon only traverse these circles, okay? Anything outside of the Antarctic Circle is frozen. The sun simply does not get there, and it cannot be occupied. So all of these lands that are up here right now are uninhabitable. Unless, of course, there's another sun. Is there? We don't know. They keep that information from us. But imagine this. Imagine while our sun and the moon were making these rotations around these concentric circles that we know as the equator, the Tropic of Capricorn, Tropic of Cancer, and so forth. Maybe there's another one doing the same thing over here. Did you ever think of that? Maybe there's another sun following the same path that's doing this same thing right over in this area. And as our sun and the moon, which you're going to see in a second, rotates, maybe this one rotates too. But regardless of that, we'll talk about that in a second. Let's go back to true north. This area right here, which Enoch refers to as one of the 3 sections, this is referred to as the Garden of Righteousness. The Garden of Righteousness from your Bible is also known as the Garden of Eden. This is where it all began, right here. Okay? There's something also very, very important about this particular area. It is highly magnetic. So what you are seeing here in this shaded in area, shaded in circle of the pinkish reddish tone, this is where what everything in our planet rotates around. Our planet is simply about rotation. Okay? Now, that does not move. That is a fixed area. That is the vortex. That is the Mount Meru. That is the Garden of Eden. That is referred to so many different cultures by so many different names. But it does not move. It is fixed. It stays right there. Everything rotates around it. Now let's venture out into these circles. See these dark red lines, these heavy dark red lines? Around the Garden of Righteousness, the Garden of Eden, our true north, around this point rotates our magnetic pole. And as you can see, right here in the middle, this is currently the North Pole. However, what we've seen recently in the last 20 years and what we've seen evidence of in recent weeks with the shifting of the Aurora Borealis, the Northern Lights show, which made its way down into North America recently, into the United States part of North America, this is shifting. So right now we have a major shift happening from the North Pole this way, over into Russia, Siberia area, which is right over here. Our magnetic pole is no longer located at the North Pole, where we think Santa Claus is and where this big ice sheet is. It's not there anymore. It's moving this way. And it will continue to move this way. Why? Because this magnetic pole rotates in a concentric circle, just like this, just like where these dark red lines are, all the way around true north. It has always done that, and it will always do that, because this pole is magnetically bound to this area. It will always travel around these dark red lines. Always. It is literally like night and day. Nothing can stop it. Nothing has ever stopped it. Nothing will ever stop it. It makes this rotational pattern consistently over time. So that's important to know, and that explains why the magnetic pole shift is happening. If you go back in time, you will see our magnetic pole traveling along this line. Now, this is, of course, only while we've been alive. It's only moved from about here to about here, which is where it is right now. But over time, it'll travel all the way around this circular line. Okay? Why is that important? Well, because our sun, which is right here, is also an electromagnetic ball. Okay? So the sun, similarly to the magnetic pole traveling around true north, around the Garden of Righteousness, similarly, our sun travels around the magnetic pole. So as this pole shifts this way, our sun shifts that way. That's what it does. You want an illustration? Watch this. Oops, did you see that? Watch closer. Watch what happens to the shaded area. See this Antarctic circle? See the outermost line right here? Watch what happens as this magnetic pole, I should say, shifts. Watch what happens to this shaded area of our known lands right now. Did you see it? Watch the next click. Watch the next click. Watch the next click. As goes, I should say, this shift of the magnetic pole, so goes the sun and the moon, because the sun and the moon rotate around that pole. So as this pole is rotating around this center point of our greater realm, so goes the sun and the moon around it, and so goes the lands that we occupy. Watch again one more time. This is where we are now. This is where we are heading. Another click after that. Another click after that. Now in these next few slides, I took out the sun and the moon because now you get the point. Those are your lines of equator, Tropic of Capricorn, Cancer, Arctic Circle, Antarctic Circle. They are moving. As the magnetic pole shifts, which it's doing, and has been doing for many, many years, has always been doing, I should say, as it shifts, so goes our lands. There's where we are now, there's where we're going. And you could see this center point right here is what the sun and the moon are bound by. The sun is a magnetic, electromagnetic force. The moon is bound by the same electromagnetic force. This shift that's happening right around these heavy red lines, this shift that is happening is natural. It has always happened, it always will happen, and it will always follow these red lines. The sun and the moon follow it. Today, a couple hundred years from now, a couple hundred years from now, about 1,000 years from now, there is nothing anyone could do to stop this shift from happening. So they'll yell climate change, and they'll yell Paris Climate Accord, and they'll siphon your money off of you because they want to control global warming. You're not controlling anything. You can control nothing. By the way, this last shift right here, we talked about the Mississippi bubble the other day. Well, you could see right here, the UK is starting to thaw out, right? You could see right here, North America and South America are starting to thaw out. And then you can see in this photo, they are thawed. Okay, you could see the United States right about in this area, South America down here. What I believe happened was, as Lemuria thawed out right here, and this is the one that we'll want to see. Well, the next click, but it's not there. Sorry about that. As Lemuria thawed out, people flocked to it, and later, after it failed, after it sunk to the ocean floor, that's when the mass exodus happened and the rest of these lands were occupied. I think many people in South America and North America are probably Lemurians. And I think the people that left Atlantis, which is right around this area here, before it sunk, probably due to electromagnetic forces, before it sunk, I think they fled to the UK, which is right in this area here. So when we were talking about the Mississippi bubble, I think these Atlanteans ended up in the UK, and then only afterwards realized that the North American continent is available, and then only afterwards realized that the South American continent is available. So I think the exodus happened like this. People were, let's go one click back. People were on Atlantis for a very long time. Here's Atlantis, no longer there. You could see that Atlantis survived. Atlantis was the place to go until the shifts started happening. Right around this time, Atlantis is still warm, but right around this time, we're getting a little bit colder. Okay? Right around the next click, which I don't have on the screen. Actually, I do. Let me go all the way back to the beginning here. You can see Atlantis now is on the outermost reaches. So what I think happened was people started to flee from Atlantis right around this time. Because the next click over, Atlantis is starting to get cold. And they went right here. They went right to the UK. And this is when the UK started to get warm. Atlantis started to get cold, probably around the same time that Atlantis sunk to the ocean floor. And then the Mississippi bubble, and John Law and his Mississippi company was selling shares to get over into this new continent that they just found out about. This is natural. This is how flat Earth works. This is where your North Pole, as well as your magnetic pole, used to be. This is where your North Pole is heading to right now. Your magnetic pole, I should say, is heading to right now. There is a major magnetic shift happening along this line. And as that shift happens, so goes your sun and your moon. You could already see areas over here, such as New Zealand, being frozen. New Zealand is already on the outer reaches, and you could kind of glance over at the Antarctic wall. Same thing with Australia. Watch what happens one click in the future. Now we have a problem. You are going to see, and they're going to blame it on climate change, but you are going to see probably within the next 100 years, no more New Zealand being occupied. And these people are going to have to vacate. Now, what happened back in the day, around this time, was these people started to vacate. And they tried to get over here, but they weren't allowed. They weren't allowed to get into these lands. The people that were in these lands, mostly the Europeans at the time, said no. And there was a great war. And that war played itself out throughout the 17 and 1800s. And most of these people who tried to migrate away from the lands that were being frozen were not able to. And before you knew it, if we go back, their lands were frozen. Europe had a stronghold on not only the European area here, but also North America as well as South America. They simply did not allow them to come. Those were your Rothschilds. Those were your cabal people. That is who runs the world today, the world that we know today. And they're panicking now because this is happening again, and the lands on this side of the map are starting to freeze, and they are looking this way. You wonder what Space Force is doing? Do you think that they're going up to space, or you think they're going over here? Because look what happens one click into the future. We got lands opening up, don't we? Now, who's in control? Are the good guys in control this time? Or is it bad guys again that aren't going to let these people escape and rehabitat over here? Now, what would naturally happen is you would take the people that are freezing over here. Both Australia is in that, South America is even in that, portions of South America, and you would relocate them to the new lands that are coming up. South America's gone. This is about 500 years from now. South America's gone. Australia's gone. New Zealand's gone. You would think that these people would be allowed to come over here, but that's not what they did back during the last reset. They stopped those people from moving and they let them die. And they kept the lands for themselves. And they rewrote the rules for the planet. And those are the rules that we live under today. And those rules have never changed. And those people that we call the cabal are the people that wrote those rules. We are in the battle for Aquarius, ladies and gentlemen. And what do we mean by the battle for Aquarius? This shift happens naturally. And what we refer to as the age of Aquarius is the next shift that the lands are going into. So when you bring up that map that we brought up before, the shift away from these lands and into the new lands falls within Aquarius. So when you hear Aquarius and you see these new lands coming up, just like we did in this video, right in here. This was Atlantis, it's gone, but this still exists. Even if you look at where we are today, it's gettable. Try getting there. Try navigating to this spot on a compass. Your compass right now is going to point to this area because this is north, right? So how do you get here? How would you possibly rely on a compass to get you to this spot? If your compass is going to point north, and let's say you're over here in the United States, right? And you want to go up here. Well, what direction is that? If your compass is pointing here for north, how do you get up here? You would have to go what, southeast? Okay, so go southeast. go southeast, and keep going. But eventually, southeast is going to no longer be southeast because your compass is going to shift as you go more east, right? So you're going to be taken completely off path. You can't get here. There's no way you could get here. And guess what? Once you try to, once you get close enough, the military presence that are going to be in these waters are going to shoot you down. I believe the only way that we could access any of these lands that are currently accessible or potentially accessible within the next 100 years is by having a massive operation such as Space Force or SpaceX. When we talk about space, you hear the word space in regards to, the planet and Earth and so forth. You hear the word space and you think of this black, starlight filled universe that's vast and expanding and planets and blah, blah, blah. We're not talking about that. We're talking about this space. This is all space over here. All space. Let's go back to Enoch again. So Enoch described in the Bible the 4 quarters of the world, which is what we have on the screen here. Let me get rid of this Aquarius thing. This is what Enoch described as the 4 quarters of the world. We went over this one right up top right here. This is what was divided into 3 sections: the dwelling of men, the vast oceans, and blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, the garden of righteousness, which is right here, accessible by accessing this quarter of the world. Okay? But if we look at what Enoch says about the other quarters, the first quarter is called the east because it is the first. Well, what does that mean? To me, that means that this quarter is where life began. This is the first. This is where life first was. Okay? Now, we know from other presentations that I've done that the earth is approximately 6,000 years old. Okay? There was a flood about 4,000 years ago. Christ walked the earth about 2,000 years ago. But if this was the first, and it took 2,000 years, a great year is it's about 2,100 years. So let's round that off and say 2,000. If it took 2,100 years or 2,000 years to go from the east to the south, because this is the way that the magnetic pole is rotating. You can see these red lines on the screen right here in this circle. If it took 2,000 years about to get from the east to the south, that would be 2,000 years right about here. We're in the south 2,000 years. Okay? Let's look at the south. Let's look at what Enoch has to say about the south. And the first quarter is called the east because it is the first, and the second, the south, because the Most High will descend there. What does Enoch mean about that? Well, the Most High are the smart people. The Most High are the ones that have the means to get from this quarter, which is now freezing, to this quarter. They'll descend there. They'll descend there because they can no longer occupy these lands because your magnetic pole is shifting. It took about 2,000 years to get here. Okay? That whole journey from east to south, the first quarter over here to the second quarter over here, is about 2,000, 2,100 years. All right? The Most High will descend there. See what he says about the next quarter. And the west quarter is named the diminished. Why? Well, I think for a couple reasons. Number one, now you're asking people to not only go from the first quarter in the east where life began, but to the second quarter, which it was very hard to get from here to here, especially back then. Now you're going over here to the west, another 2,000, 2,100 years later. Well, that's where we are now. Actually, we're up here now. But this is diminished because, first of all, there's not a lot of lands. If you look at the lands down here in this quarter, in the south quarter, there are much more lands than there are in the west. So diminished could mean a couple things. If you look at the percentage of land down here, it is mostly land. If you look at percentage of land over here in the west versus water, it is diminished. It is big time diminished. And I think also the population diminished big time. So if we started over here in the east, and it took about 2,000 years to get here, then another 2,000 years to get here, then another 2,000 years to get here, well, lo and behold, ladies and gentlemen, that's 6,000 years. And if you look at Kent Hovind's presentation on why he believes that the earth is 6,000 years old, it lines up perfectly with Enoch. The first quarter is called the east because it is the first. The second the south because the Most High will descend there. And the west is named the diminished. Then, of course, we get to the fourth quarter, named the north, divided into three parts. The first of them is the dwelling of men. What I think Enoch meant by that is the lands. This is the first area of the three, the dwelling of men. The second contains seas and water, and the abysses and forests and rivers. Well, that's this area, right in here. Lemuria, you got New Zealand up here, Australia here, Lemuria no longer there. This is seas, this is waters, this is forests, this is the abysses and clouds and darkness, because no one's there. And the third part is called the Garden of Righteousness, right here, where everything rotates around. This is where we are now. We are in the fourth quarter of the fourth rotation of Earth's magnetic pole. We started in the east. It was the first. The Most High descended to the south. And even though with that descent and all of that population, we diminished in the west. And those that were left in the west found their way over to the north. And unfortunately, the people that ended up in the north were very bad people, and they rewrote our history to keep all of this from us. You live in a very large electromagnetic terrarium. And this terrarium is covered by a firmament, which is mentioned in the Bible some 200 times. And the Bible talks about the edges of the world many times. Enoch talks about the four quarters of the world. What you are going through right now, when you look at this is natural. This cannot be stopped. This has already happened, and it will happen again and again and again every 2,000 years, about 2,156 years. There's nothing anyone could do about this. The sun and the moon are bound by the shift in the magnetic pole. It is as natural as night and day, and nothing can stop it. We, ladies and gentlemen, are in a battle for Aquarius. Aquarius is what happens in the next shift. We are currently here, and the next shift is happening. And it's happening much quicker than we thought it would. And that's why they're panicking with climate change. That's why they're trying to dim the sun. Nothing will work. It's moving. You can't stop it from moving. This is the one they're afraid of. This one, yeah, a little bit. Because you got some lands over here that are going to be unoccupiable. This one. This is the one they're worried about. They don't have a plan for this. And the forces that be, the forces that are fighting right now, are fighting for the age of Aquarius. It's the battle for Aquarius to get into this next quarter, which is right here. This is Aquarius right here. The people that used to live over here where we live now, what happens to them? What are we going to find in all of these lands? What will we find over here? Will we find new buildings, new technology? Because it's happened before. When the shift happened here in all of our lands that we occupy now started becoming available, we found all sorts of buildings. We found all sorts of stuff. What will we find when we get to the South? Who's going to make it? Will the cabal still be in control and allow everyone to die before they could descend? We don't know. We don't know. And that's the scary part. Guys, thanks for watching this. I hope you learned something. And if you have any questions, obviously ask in the comments down below.